So Pete Buttigieg is going to an environment that is not hostile to him at all. And he's doing this and he's flubbing his chances. Look, I'm sorry, I like Pete, but he really just comes across as tone deaf as he continues to repeat this Israel's right to self-defense thing in 2025. Sorry, Pete, 92% of them voters aren't going to like this answer. Oh, God, he's choking on his own words and can't even fathom criticizing Israel. What I'm trying to explain to you guys, what I'm trying to communicate to you guys, speaking of the counterbalance against growing fascism in this country, let's get back to the Democratic Party and specifically Pete Buttigieg, who is the same Pete Buttigieg that ran unsuccessfully in 2019, that is now repackaged because he has the same exact sentiment, but at least this time he has a beard. Pete Buttigieg went on Crooked Media on an interview tour. If you want to understand like what the mainstream Democratic position is going to be on this issue that is unconscionable, that is very black and white, that the entire base actually is of one mind on, not many issues have this level of support. 92% sympathetic to Palestinians and only 8% sympathetic to Israel's actions in this process in the Democratic base. And yet here is a Democrat hopeful and his statements specifically as it pertains to Israel, Palestine, genocide, starvation of children.
Half of Senate Democrats just voted to oppose the sale of over $500 million worth of U.S. bombs and guns to Israel. Would you have voted to oppose sending those weapons?
I think we need to insist that if American taxpayer funding is going to weaponry that is going to Israel, that is not going to things that shock the conscience. And look, we see images every day.
Bro, it's a yes or no question. Just say Israel's violating the law. And of course, we shouldn't be sending weapons. It is illegal. It is illegal. It is illegal under American law to send weapons to a country that is doing war crimes. This isn't even like genocide, okay? You can justify refusing to send weapons to Israel under the pre-existing laws that we have in the books without even saying the G word, which plenty of people are afraid of saying. So this wishy-washy answer, even on this issue, is ridiculous.
That shock the conscience. So much of this is complicated, but what's not complicated is that if a child is starving because of a choice made by a government, that is unconscionable. And I think especially including voices who care about Israel, who believe in Israel's right to exist, who have stood with Israel in response to the unbelievable cruelty and terrorism of October 7th. I think there's a reason why so many of those voices are speaking up now too, because this is not just something that is on its face and in itself a moral catastrophe. It is also a catastrophe for Israel for the long run.
How do you think?
Oh no, it's a catastrophe for Israel in the long run. This is a statement that would have been a half measure in like November 2023. Okay, you could have been like Israel's reaction to October 7, okay, while highlighting the atrocities of October 7, is actually creating a danger for Israel's future, is an argument you could have conducted, and it still would have been half measure. It would not have been a serious response, but you could have maybe done that in November 2023. Maybe into like the beginning of the year 2024. 22 months after the fact, this is so incompetent and refusing to reckon with the reality that everyone can see. It's basically for this brilliant messenger that Pete Buttigieg is supposed to be, his inability to read the room is alarming. This kind of wishy-washy sentiment this far in is also going to tank his chances of even running for president. That's it. Ross Barkan says the 2028 Democratic primary is going to look very different than any primary that came before. Democrats until 2024 or so could sneak away with answers like these, but they won't work anymore. I don't think that's actually wishful thinking. I think that's legit. If there is a single Democrat on that stage that says Israel can suck my dick, they are going to clean house. That's all it takes. The only way they can probably limit the impact is by refusing to entertain any Democrat that says that. That is the only way that they can shut down this point of contention, this discourse within the base of support, within the base of the Democratic Party. Because if they're all speaking like Pete Buttigieg, and then one person, all it takes is saying, no, this is ridiculous. Israel's doing a genocide. What the fuck are we doing? We've given them unlimited billions of dollars of weapons. They have healthcare. We don't. I want healthcare for American citizens. We're shutting off the money faucet. We're shutting off the weapons faucet. They are winning. Okay? As I've said over and over again, even if you're a cynical, cold, calculated, amoral political actor who does not care about starving children, Pete Buttigieg clearly doesn't, you should, at the very least, utilize the Israel route specifically to communicate earnesty that you might not have. Not to play into identity politics about anti-Zionist Jew with clean house right now. Oh, for sure. Especially because anti-Zionist Jews also have a tremendous amount of room to navigate these waters in a way that they won't withstand the same accusations that I do or Zoran does in terms of like being a terrorist, being an Islamist fundamentalist like that. That is just the reality of the matter. I recognize that. I wish that that wasn't the case. I wish that like people could still listen to someone like myself on this issue without immediately assuming that it's because of my Muslim background that I'm actually anti-Semitic deeply. But that is the reality. Not to say that a Muslim candidate couldn't overcome said hurdles, as Zohran Mamdani very clearly did. You know, it would be someone who is of this background would absolutely benefit from being Jewish, certainly, and because that would eradicate like 90% of the attacks that are launched against people that speak out on this stuff.
The next administration should handle our relationship with Israel. Do you think it should change based on what Netanyahu has done the last several years?
Well, certainly Netanyahu can't be the only voice or the only compass for what should happen in the U.S.-Israel relationship. And, you know, no matter how...
That's so funny. Because, like, he's not using that to say... Obviously, plenty of other members of the Knesset are directly responsible for the genocide. He's using that to say, no, it's just Netanyahu, but right now it's only Netanyahu, but there are plenty of innocents in the Israeli parliament, Israeli Knesset that we could rely on. He's doing but it's only Netanyahu exit ramp.
Strongly, or especially because of...
Yeah, once again, the environment that he's in is crooked media, okay? And you need to understand something about crooked media. These are former Obama boys, okay? The Podjans are. They worked in the Obama administration. They are an important voice within the Democratic Party. They have a decent amount of presence as like active consultants, right? The reason why I'm bringing this up is because the people that Pete Buttigieg is talking to right now have said it is a litmus test. Israel is a litmus test for the Democrats in 2028. So Pete Buttigieg is going to an environment that is not hostile to him at all. And he's doing this and he's flubbing his chances. Look, I'm sorry, I like Pete, but he really just comes across as tone deaf as he continues to repeat this Israel's right to self-defense thing in 2025. Sorry, Pete, 92% of them voters aren't going to like this answer. Oh, God, he's choking on his own words and can't even fathom criticizing Israel. What I'm trying to explain to you guys, what I'm trying to communicate to you guys is this. Right now, it's Israel o'clock. And people that these guys would love, normally the Podjan audience would love Pete Buttigieg to be the leader of the Democratic Party. They don't think too much about like what these guys' actual values are. But Israel is such a black and white issue that politicians that don't communicate the anger, the resentment, the animosity that like the average Democrat experiences, the average Democrat feels in their heart about the genocidal apartheid state, Israel, is going to actually tar their own reputation. It is actually hurting people to take this wishy-washy stance on Israel, ironically enough. And a lot of these guys, I guess, can't read the room or are terrified of somehow speaking out against Israel and then withstanding some kind of attack, not realizing that if they were to say Israel loudly and proudly right now, they would get an unimaginable amount of support from average people, from across party lines, as a matter of fact. Because like I've said, it is Israel o'clock, okay? And there are plenty who seemingly can't read the time. Ben Rhodes is another Podjan, also worked for the Obama administration, says, Pete is a smart guy and I admire a lot of what he's done, but I have absolutely no idea what he thinks based on these answers. Just tell us what you believe. That's a much more gracious, much nicer way to analyze what Pete Buttigieg's wishy-washy statements look like. One issue that's increasingly dividing both parties is the war in Gaza, says Pod Save America's host John Favs, but isn't true. Only a small minority of Democrats, 8% per Gallup, support the war. No, I think he meant like increasingly divide both parties he meant like Republicans versus Democrats, for the record. Not like it's a divide between the Democratic base of support. I think they understand that there is no divide within the Democratic base of support for Israel adjacent sentiment. Is it fear of AIPAC and ADL that makes otherwise progressive people try to avoid criticizing Israel? I think it's because it's foreign policy, and foreign policy is like it's not something that you touch within the Democratic Party at all. You are always pro-war no matter what, especially post 9/11, especially post Obama. But Pete isn't a progressive beacon anyway. The reason why I think Pete Buttigieg's statements here are instructive is because he is a younger face for establishment Democrats. So I like to try to understand exactly where he's coming from in terms of like where the establishment Democrats' best communicator is. A large part of it is people are scared of getting called anti-Semitic. I think that is, again, an inability to read the room, though, because this kind of shit doesn't work anymore. Okay? Drama slop tubers still say you're anti-Semitic. Yeah, but it doesn't matter. That's my point. Okay? The ADL says I'm anti-Semitic. The ADL is supposed to be an incredibly influential institution that gets to play the role of like a kingmaker and play the role of like shutting off media, mainstream media, from giving you positive coverage. If the ADL can't stop me from getting placement in mainstream media outlets and magazines and newspapers and whatnot, then it means that it's over. Okay? That's it. Like slop tubers are irrelevant. No adult is actually taking their notes from slop tubers. Let's be real. That's mostly to like a younger audience that wants to feel smart, and therefore they can't like actually broach the subject matter that's like dense and too complicated for them to comprehend. So they just like watch someone basically summarize the worst version of events and get their notes from that. That's just like children's entertainment. But if we're talking about like the actual institutional prowess of a organization like the ADL, in the past, if they said you're anti-Semitic, you're not getting a New York Times article written about you that is positive. You're not getting CNN placements. It's not happening at all. But the very fact that they're not able to do so any longer implies that most people understand what's going on, and that their ridiculous claims of anti-Semitism just fall on fucking deaf ears. They've hit that too much. Anyway, near certain 2028 candidate already hitting Pete on this clip. The politics around Israel are going to be unrecognizably different in 2028 compared to the past. Here's Ro Khanna saying, I respect Pete, but we need moral clarity, not status quo. Yes, John Favs should have voted for the Sanders Amendment. Yes, Dems should join my letter recognizing a Palestinian state. Yes, Trump and Biden disastrously failed on Gaza, and we need a new human rights-centered vision. Again, a long way from Ro Khanna at the DNC actively denying charges of genocide and being like, I wouldn't communicate like that, or saying that Israel's an apartheid state. He's now come along to the recognition of Palestinian statehood. It's still obviously weaker than what is necessary at this point, but it's an indication that like at least some of the better room readers within the Democratic Party's ranks are changing their attitude. They're changing their sentiment. This is the same playbook. What is this? Yeah.
Of how strongly you might believe in Israel's right to exist and defend itself. You don't have to make excuses for the choices that Netanyahu is making, especially because they are often made not only in the name of the Israeli people, but in the name of a U.S. alliance. I think that
the two things average voter hates about Democrats are, one, the fact that they use corporate speak so you can never pinpoint their beliefs, and two, how much they love spending money and weapons for war to other countries, especially Israel. And Pete does both in the worst possible ways within 3 minutes. Yeah. This is under 3 minutes of Pete Buttigieg using corpo speak because he's unable to speak in any other way because he's a McKinsey consultant, while simultaneously defending Democrats' endless support for Israel or sending weapons to Israel and continuing whatever the Israel wants to do, which is unconscionable.
We, as Israel's strongest ally and friend, you put your arm around your friend when there's something like this going on and talk about...
Is Israel our friend? if you ask the average American at this point, they're like, Israel is dog walking America. Okay. I feel like in the public's eye, they no longer believe that like Israel is our ally. They think Israel is understandably so. They think Israel is a hostile entity that gets to dictate American domestic policy, as a matter of fact. And that's really, really frustrating. And also a recipient of endless amounts of money.
About what we're prepared to do together. And it certainly cannot be what we see right now from this administration and this president talking about beachfront property in Gaza before he's prepared to talk about human.
Yeah, and then you try to separate yourself from the current administration when in fact, like, you can't have this marginal approach. Okay, we saw the ground set, the stage set for Donald Trump to seize control over on the issue of Israel under the Biden administration. Their inability to reckon with the demands being made by the public cost them the election. And that was a gamble that they were willing to entertain. They were willing to allow this country to succumb to a fascist takeover because of how much they wanted to support Israel. That was a part of it. Israel was emblematic of the way that Democrats refused to entertain the actual considerations of the base of support. There were plenty of people that they cast aside willingly, and they won nothing in return. The only thing they wanted in return was more dead children. People are not going to forget this. The best possible way to communicate at this moment is to just openly say, just like Ro Khanna did, like, both presidencies have f***ed up on this issue. I'm here to represent a change that is necessary, because I think what Israel's doing is unconscionable, and they should not have American weapons, and they should actually have American condemnations. They should have American sanctions rather than weapons.
Human suffering in Gaza.
Do you think it's time to recognize a Palestinian state?
I think that's a profound question that arouses a lot of the biggest problems that have happened with Israel's survival, Israel's right to survival in the diplomatic scene, and many of the people who have taken that.
I don't care about Israel's right to survival. Israel can suck my dick. They're doing a genocide. They're a Nazi country. The idea, and guess what, dude? Think about how the attitude has changed. If you think that right now it's not Israel o'clock, think about how we got to this point where you have to concede on certain things that you never thought you would ever have to concede on with our allegiance to Israel, like denying weapons transfers to Israel. What do you think is going to happen 2 months from now? Why do these idiots think that the situation is going to change for the better? That this issue is simply going to go away and people are going to stop paying attention? No, this is the most popular Israel will ever be at the global stage today. Today is the most popular Israel will ever be on the global stage. Okay? Tomorrow, Israel is going to be less popular. And the day after that, it's going to be even less popular. So when you're actually making an impact here, when you're making this statement, by the time this weekends, there's going to be 10 new atrocities that Israel is engaged with that is going to make people even more angry. I don't understand how these people refuse to recognize how much they have had to change their messaging on Israel, okay? They literally have had to reckon with public sentiment shifting so dramatically that they had to come out and change their discourse, change the way that they're communicating on this issue so much from October 2023. Why do they think that it's not going to go even further? This is what I don't understand about all of the people who are like holding on to liberal Zionist exit ramps. All the people that are holding on to this notion that like we still have to act as though, you know, Israel is the most moral nation. Israel is our ally. Maybe they're up a little bit. Why? Do you not recognize that there is no more off ramps here? It's over. It's done. If you don't recognize it now, why do you think public sentiment is ever going to swing back in the direction of a coherent pro-Israel narrative? Are you that stupid? That is genuinely my question. Like, are you that stupid that you genuinely think this is going to turn around somehow magically, and all of the death and all of the destruction, when the dust is settled, is going to somehow favor Israel's position? That they're just going to magically find Hamas command centers under all of the hospitals that they've bombed, even though they literally unearthed all of the hospitals and found 0 Hamas command and control centers? Like, what do you think is going to happen? At this point, as a matter of fact, I would go so far as to say that people wouldn't even give a if there were Hamas command and control centers under the hospitals, because they think Like the public sentiment has shifted so much that people are coming to the conclusion in the most Islamophobic country on the planet, the United States of America, people are coming to the conclusion that like Islamic resistance against Israel's occupation and genocide may not be as bad as they previously thought it was. If you call everyone and everything Hamas, and Hamas is the name of the opposition against Israel's genocide, then people are going to say, okay, we're Hamas then. That's it. That's the final, that is literally the final aspect of this, the final stronghold that will inevitably fall apart. And it has already. It's started already falling apart. In spite of the unimaginable enmity that people feel towards Muslims and how scared people are in post 9/11 universe of like Islamic style terrorism or whatever people have recognized that Israel is literally ISIS. Israel's operating as though it is ISIS. But the difference between Israel and ISIS is that we're giving them the weapons to do ISIS. And on top of that, we're silencing opposition to Israel or, ISIS equivalent Israel in the United States of America at the behest of ISIS equivalent Israel. It's f***ed up. Pete Buttigieg talking about Palestine is what happens when someone who wants to perfectly triangulate a middle position on every issue runs into an issue where there's no middle ground for him to hide in. Yep.